I knew the weather had shifted in the building the first week he arrived. Not the air conditioning, the weather. Conversations went hushed at the ends of hallways. People learned to say innovation with their teeth clenched. He was Carter Langley, CEO for Now's son, a man who wore his father's last name like a bulletproof vest and a quarter zip like a coronation robe. He called me Lisa, the way some people say assistant, even though I'd been director of operations and risk at Line Dynamics for 15 years. Our founder, Elias Ward, used to call me our hinge. The quiet piece everything swings on. Elias built the company at a metal folding table in a rented storefront, the kind with a bell that rang every time someone opened the door. When money finally came in, he didn't buy a Porsche. He bought fireproof cabinets and a second scanner. Processes make permanence, he'd say, sliding a document across to me with a pen and a post-it that read, Copy X3. My job was simple: make sure the bones outlast the buzzwords. Carter was all buzzwords. He liked to schedule brain sprint stand-ups at dawn and congratulate himself for owning morning mind share. He wanted to sunset anything that didn't sparkle on a slide. The first week, he converted our wiki into a Slack channel called Carter's Notes. The second, he hired his college roommate as head of culture velocity. By the third, he was walking through compliance like a realtor with a ring light. Being underestimated is quiet oxygen. You can hear the gears turn while everyone else performs breathing exercises. I watched him replace competence with charisma and charisma with caffeine. I watched good people move their framed certificates into boxes, and I started opening drawers that hadn't seen daylight in years. Elias and I had written things for days like this. Not for enemies, for amnesia. Families forget where the engine is when the hood ornament is shiny enough. Deep in our governance binder, in plain English and 3 signatures, lived a clause people had joked about as the ghost lock. It wasn't a joke. It had teeth. Carter didn't notice my calendar permissions narrowing or how HR started emailing me summaries instead of memos. He didn't notice the notary stamp on my desk. He didn't notice that every quick change he pushed was quietly mirrored into a private archive labeled Foundational Controls Ward. He didn't notice much at all except his own reflection on the boardroom glass. He noticed me at 7:58 a.m. He was waiting in conference B with an HR manager and a brand new ceramic mug that said, Monday is a mindset. He smiled the way people do when they've practiced in an elevator mirror. Consider yourself history. He laughed, and even his laugh had product in it. I nodded once. I didn't argue. Arguments are for people trying to keep a door open. I was making sure the hinges remembered how to swing. I walked out with my tote down the corridor lined with company photos, Elias in a wrinkled shirt, our first server rack, the night we hit our Series B. My hands were steady. My mouth tasted like copper. In the car, I did the ugliest thing I'd allow myself all week. I breathed out a sound that didn't have a word. Then I opened my banking app, deposited the final paycheck, and let the timestamp settle on the screen like a weight clicking into place. Carter thought firing me would be a clean break. He'd forgotten that clean breaks are a medical term. Bones, not people. I drove 2 blocks, parked by a FedEx, and walked into the notary's office that knows me by first name and favorite pen. The envelope was already prepped, a cover letter, a certification log, and 1 page printed from a scan I'd made in 2016 and rescanned every 3 years like clockwork. The notary read the first line, blinked, then looked up at me the way pilots look at thunderstorms. She didn't ask questions. She stamped. Paper doesn't blush. Paper doesn't flinch. The courier met me on the sidewalk, a woman with a high bun and a messenger bag that had seen more boardrooms than some executives. I handed her the envelope, checked our delivery protocol one more time, general counsel only, signature required, no substitutes, and watched her take off toward Line's glass facade. I didn't go home. I crossed the street to the little coffee shop with the sticky tables and the perfect burnt smell, sat by the window, and opened a legal pad. I wrote 3 lines. Termination executed. Funds received. Notice in flight. People imagine revenge as heat. It isn't. It's precision. Heat is for show. Precision is for change. Through the glass, I could see Carter in the lobby, phone in hand, grin turned up to maximum. He looked like a man promoting a cliff as a new way to continue walking. Upstairs, the board was gathering for their routine meeting, the one that always started too early to be useful and always ended too late to be honest. Waiting for them was our general counsel, Mara Shu, a woman who reads contracts the way botanists read forests. 30 minutes after I'd been made history, the courier stepped into the boardroom. Security let her in. Legal protocol does that for certain deliveries. She passed the envelope to Mara. Mara broke the seal, scanned the first line, and slid the letter across to Carter's father, the actual CEO, paler, already an inch lighter than the paper. He read. His lips moved once. "You just triggered the founder's reversion clause," he whispered. Silence eats rooms differently when it knows it's being watched. From my window, the building didn't move, but I could feel the pressure change, the way a door thumps shut 3 floors away. Power is not who talks the loudest at 7:58 a.m. Power is who knows which sentence still counts at noon. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I circled a word on my pad: continuity. People think these stories are about revenge. They're not. They're about remembering what you promised a company before someone tried to rename it Carter's Notes. The strange thing about silence in an office building is how it leaks. You don't need microphones or bugged walls. You can feel when something shifts upstairs. Phones stop ringing. Shoes stop echoing on tile. Even the barista in the cafe across the street paused when she saw the courier walk through the revolving doors with that envelope. She poured too much foam into a latte, eyes fixed on the lobby like it might catch fire. From my corner seat by the window, I sipped bitter coffee and pretended to write notes while the truth was already spilling in slow motion 3 floors above. Mara, the general counsel, wasn't a woman easily rattled. She once stopped a merger dead in its tracks by asking one question about indemnification. For her to slide a paper to the CEO without a word meant something tectonic had cracked. Carter had no idea. He was still pacing the ground floor, grinning at his phone, probably drafting another Slack announcement about streamlining legacy weight. He stopped at the reception desk, tossed the intern a wink, and adjusted his cufflinks like the whole building was an audience for his debut. The son of the CEO, the heir to a title he'd never earned. When I joined Line Dynamics, none of this glass and steel grandeur existed. We were 10 people in a rented office above a nail salon. The servers ran hot enough to warm the whole floor. I used to bring popsicles in July just so the interns wouldn't melt. Elias, the founder, kept receipts for every expense in a shoebox and called me his second set of lungs. "Lisa, you breathe structure into chaos," he once told me. I laughed then, embarrassed, but it stuck. That was before the board grew hungry, before Elias's health faded, before Carter's polished loafers clacked their way into the conference rooms. I stayed because someone has to protect the bones when the paint starts peeling. Inside, I could imagine the scene. The board sitting in their usual half-circle, half of them barely awake, the other half watching stock tickers on their tablets. Then Mara breaking the seal, the weight of her silence filling the air. The CEO, Carter's father, reading the first line, the blood draining from his face. They wouldn't know right away what it meant. Not all of them. Corporate law is written like a hedge maze. But Elias and I had written the reversion clause so plain, so unavoidable, that even a distracted executive could recognize the teeth in the words: termination without board approval. Automatic reversion to founder's trust. Successor named in sealed directive. Simple, brutal. I tapped my pen against the legal pad. This wasn't revenge. Not in the cinematic sense. I hadn't stormed into the boardroom or raised my voice. I hadn't written any anonymous exposés or leaked scandals to journalists. All I had done was keep a promise. Elias's promise that Line Dynamics would never be eaten alive by bloodlines instead of backbone. My phone buzzed. A message from Patrice, my old assistant. "What did you do?" I didn't reply. Not yet. By late morning, the building was breathing differently. Security guards walked faster. Executives whispered in pairs by the elevators. Even from across the street, I could see the change, people not meeting each other's eyes, hurrying between rooms like carrying invisible fire buckets. Carter was nowhere to be seen. My guess, upstairs, trying to charm his way past Mara with buzzwords about modernization initiatives. That's the thing about charm. It evaporates under fluorescent lights when the paperwork is stamped. Around noon, a second courier arrived. This one wasn't mine. Likely from the board's outside counsel, a firm so dry they made sandpaper look glossy. They didn't come for flowers or pleasantries. They came for files. And files meant time was already running. I closed my eyes for a moment and thought about Elias. He hadn't wanted his company to become a dynasty built on entitlement. He'd wanted it to be a machine that could outlast him, a structure stronger than the personality at the top. Paper doesn't care about names, he used to say. It only cares about signatures. And signatures, I had plenty. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. The voicemail that followed was Carter's voice, its edges fraying. Lisa, hey. Look, we might have gotten off on the wrong foot. There's been some chatter, legal stuff. Maybe we can talk. Just, give me a call when you can. I played it twice, not because I needed to hear the words, but because the tone mattered. Gone was the smug certainty of consider yourself history. What replaced it was the sound of a man realizing history doesn't delete so easily. I didn't call back. Silence is its own reply. When the office lights began to glow against the evening sky, I packed up my pad, left a few coins on the table, and stepped outside. The air smelled different, electric, like the hour before a storm. Revenge stories often end with a single explosion, a dramatic reveal, a public fall. But in real life, it's slower. It's the steady cracking of foundations. It's the quiet shuffle of lawyers in conference rooms. It's the way a man who thought he owned the morning suddenly finds the night watching him instead. As I walked to my car, I thought about the message in all of this. Not just for Carter, but for anyone who believes inheritance outruns confidence. Power borrowed is never power kept, and arrogance is a poor substitute for permanence. Tomorrow would bring louder voices, maybe even shouting. But today was just the silence between floors, the kind that tells you something irreversible has already begun. The next morning, the air outside line dynamics felt heavier, like the building itself knew it was carrying a secret. I parked across the street again, coffee in hand, and watched the revolving doors spin as employees trickled in. Most of them didn't know yet. They came with earbuds in, coffee cups balanced on folders, key cards ready. Business as usual, except it wasn't. Inside, Carter had his work cut out for him. He might have been the CEO's son, but the board wasn't made up of his fraternity brothers. They were veterans, some cautious, some ruthless, but all allergic to risk. And risk is what the reversion clause spelled in 12-point Times New Roman. I could imagine the scene, Carter striding into the boardroom, quarter zip zipped halfway, hair gelled within an inch of its life, acting like he was about to pitch a startup to investors. He probably thought if he kept talking fast enough, he could outpace the paper. But you can't outpace paper. I didn't need eyes inside to know the timeline was already eating him alive. Mara, our general counsel, would have spent half the night combing through archives, cross-referencing compliance logs, making calls to the trust executive. She was thorough. She'd confirmed what I already knew. The clause was valid, reaffirmed in audits, notarized, and ready to bite. By 9, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, this one shorter. Lisa, call me, please. He was starting to understand. It's funny. People assume revenge comes with fireworks, but real consequences creep in quietly. They don't arrive like lightning. They spread like cracks in concrete, silent, unstoppable, until the whole structure groans. At 10, I got a text from Patrice, my old assistant. Half the floor is whispering. They know something's wrong. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Better she stayed in the dark until the board moved. Loose words ruin clean cuts. Instead, I jotted notes in my pad, voicemail too. Desperation clear. Internal whispers beginning, cracks visible. I closed my eyes for a moment and remembered Elias again. He hated nepotism more than anything. A company isn't a family, Lisa, he'd tell me. It's a trust. You borrow the keys from the people who came before you, and you earn the right to pass them on. Bloodlines don't earn keys. Work does. That's why we'd written the clause. Not as a sword, but as a shield to keep the company from being gutted by arrogance. By noon, News had started leaking. A small tech blog posted a headline, "Line and Governance Dispute. Sources cite legacy clause." It was vague, barely 3 paragraphs, but enough to rattle investors. Stock dipped 2% before lunch. It wasn't free fall, but it was a tremor. I could only imagine Carter's face when he saw that headline. He loved articles when they praised him, hated them when they hinted he wasn't in control. The kind of man who'd call PR in a panic, demand a press release, and forget that lawyers don't let you spin what's already in motion. Another text came through, this time from an unknown number. "He's blaming you. Says you planted this." I almost laughed. Planted? I hadn't planted anything. I just watered what Elias and I had buried years ago. Around 3, I got another voicemail, the third in 24 hours. His voice cracked this time. "Lisa, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you can't win this. My dad won't let you. The board won't let you. Just call me back, okay? Before this gets worse. Before this gets worse." That line stuck with me. He still thought there was a lever he could pull, a way to make this go away. He didn't understand that the lever had already snapped in his hand. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, the building's lights flickered on. I watched executives shuffle out, their faces tighter than yesterday. No laughter, no casual waves, just people walking faster than usual, as if the air inside had grown thinner. When I got home, I didn't pour wine or celebrate. I heated leftover soup, sat at my desk, and opened the file labeled Continuity Package. Inside were scanned copies of every notarized page, Elias's original notes, and my logs. I reviewed them like a pilot checking instruments before a long flight. Not out of doubt, but because routine steadies nerves. This wasn't about winning. Winning implied ego. This was about structure, about proving that permanence comes from process, not pedigree. Before bed, I listened to Carter's 3 voicemails one more time. The arc was clear, smug certainty, then forced calm, then cracks in his voice. I deleted the first, saved the second and third. I played them twice, then archived them in a folder called Echoes because tomorrow the storm would break louder. And Carter needed to learn what Elias always knew. You can laugh at history, but history doesn't laugh back. By Thursday morning, the building looked the same from the outside, glass catching the sunrise, employees scanning badges, delivery vans lining up at the curb. But from across the street, I could sense it. The rhythm was gone. People walked in with heads bowed, conversations clipped. The silence had teeth now. Carter hadn't called overnight, but the board had met late. I knew their habits too well. If lights burned past midnight on the top floor, it wasn't about quarterly reports. It was about survival. And survival meant lawyers. I bought a coffee, sat at my usual window seat, and watched. At 9 sharp, black sedans rolled up, not the kind that bring investors, the kind that bring outside counsel. 3 suited figures stepped out, briefcases in hand, moving with the stiff posture of people paid to confirm bad news. That alone told me everything. The clause wasn't dismissed. It was alive, gnawing through the company's foundation. Inside, I could imagine the scene, the board table crowded with folders, coffee going cold, faces drawn tight. Mara, calm but sharp, laying out the findings. The clause had been reaffirmed in audits, stamped and signed, unaltered since Elias himself approved it. No wiggle room, no modernization initiative could erase it. And Carter, he would have been pacing, voice too loud, trying to laugh it off. I'd seen him do it before. When he missed a compliance deadline, when a vendor threatened to walk, he'd make jokes, spin buzzwords, talk about disruption like it was a shield. But disruption doesn't erase ink. Around 10, my phone buzzed with a message from Patrice. It's chaos. People are saying control might revert. They're scared. I typed, "Stay calm. Don't get pulled in." Then I deleted it. Best not to leave a trail. Instead, I wrote in my pad, "Whispers confirmed." Fear spreading. By noon, the market noticed. A major outlet picked up the story. Wardline faces leadership uncertainty, legacy clause at center of dispute. The headline was everywhere within hours. Stock slid 6%. That's when panic stops being internal. That's when investors start calling, asking why a $1 billion company is being tripped up by something written in 2009. I could almost hear Carter's voice rising in that boardroom. It's ceremonial, symbolic. We sunset those documents years ago. And Mara's cold reply, study as a scalpel, no, Carter. We sunset templates, not governing documents. At 3, another voicemail hit my phone. His voice was brittle now. Lisa, look, we can fix this. Just talk to me. My dad's furious. The board's turning on me, but if you just, I don't know, withdraw whatever you filed. Maybe we can work something out. Please. It struck me how quickly power changes flavor. Just days ago, he'd smirked across a conference table and called me history. Now he was pleading into a voicemail like a man clinging to a cliff's edge. But this was never about clinging. It was about continuity, about honoring Elias's belief that permanence comes from structure, not bloodlines. As evening fell, the building lights flickered on again. I watched executives shuffle out, faces pale, lips pressed tight. Someone was crying by the revolving doors, an assistant clutching a half-empty box. That told me Carter was making desperate moves, firing people, trying to reassert control. But desperation only accelerates collapse. At home, I opened my continuity package again. Checked every page, every signature, every timestamp. The documents were airtight. Elias had trusted me to safeguard them, and I had. The process was doing the work now. All I had to do was wait. Before bed, I listened to Carter's latest voicemail. I didn't delete it. I saved it in the same folder as the others. I wanted the record, not for revenge, but for proof. Proof that arrogance always bends when faced with structure. That night, I dreamed of Elias, not sick, not fading, but sitting at his folding table again, receipts in a shoebox, sleeves rolled up. He looked at me across the table and said the same thing he used to say when systems worked, good. Now it can last. And that's when I knew tomorrow wouldn't just be cracks. Tomorrow, the whole boardroom would fracture. The morning the clock ran out, the street looked ordinary. Trash truck groaning past, a cyclist arguing with a taxi, the cafe doorbell sticking on its second ring. Ordinary is a good disguise for turning points. It keeps the crowd from noticing until the hinge has already swung. I took the same seat by the window. The legal pad came out of my bag out of habit more than need. The work had been done days, years ago. Ink layered over ink, signatures nested like scaffolding. I wasn't nervous. I was attentive. It felt like waiting for bread to rise. You don't yank the oven door. You trust the recipe. Across the street, security escorted a courier through the revolving doors. Different bag, same posture. Protocol never performs. It just proceeds. I knew where she was going. Top floor, long hallway, the boardroom with the 2 cold vents and the view executives pretend not to stare at during tough meetings. She would hand the envelope to Mara. Mara would open it with the same small blade she used for everything. Then the room would get very, very quiet. I didn't go in right away. I gave it time to breathe. 15 minutes later, my phone lit up. Unknown number, short text, please come upstairs. No punctuation. That was a tell. Lawyers use periods even when they breathe. The lobby mirrored my face back at me, older than when I first walked in all those years ago, steadier, less inclined to explain. The elevator ride felt like moving through compressed air. On the top floor, the receptionist stood as if her chair had decided not to trust gravity anymore. She didn't ask for my badge. She just nodded toward the corridor. The boardroom door was open, not wide, just enough. Mara met me in the threshold, eyes level, voice even. Thank you for coming. Inside, the table was lined with folders, pens aligned like small decisions. The board sat in weary formation. Carter's father, gray, drawn, kept his hands flat on the wood as if bracing for swells. Carter stood near the blinds, trying to choose between anger and charm, and finding neither fitted. He looked smaller without an audience. Mara spoke first. The reversion clause has been executed and validated. The trust directive is clear. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. She turned a page, slid a document toward the chair, then to me. Operational oversight is transferred. Effective immediately. No applause. No gasps. Serious rooms don't do theatrics when paper has the floor. The chair cleared her throat. Miss Ortiz. Lisa, do you accept? I thought of Elias at that folding table, of the shoebox of receipts, of the first fireproof cabinet, of the interns eating popsicles by hot servers, of the day he handed me a pen and said, I thought of how the company had learned to say innovation with its teeth clenched and how bones don't care about slogans. Yes, I said. I accept. Some decisions sound louder in memory than in real time. This one landed like a stamp final, not because I said so, but because the process had already done the talking. Carter moved then. This is ridiculous, he snapped. She's operations. She files things. You can't just hand her. He stopped when two security officers stepped into the doorway behind me. They didn't touch him. Good security knows touch turns moments into scenes. The chair kept her voice even. Mr. Langley, you'll receive your separation agreement. We'll schedule an opportunity for you to collect personal items. He looked at me the way people look at stopped elevators. You did this. No, I said. Elias did. I just kept the copy. He laughed once, harsh and lonely, then pushed past the officers, shoulders high. The door clicked when it shut. Quiet can be merciful. It can also be exact. We turned to business. Mara walked me through the chain of command memos, a checklist of departments that needed immediate reassurance. Payroll first. Fear breeds fastest there. Then compliance. They already knew the story but needed the stamp. Customer accounts. Money comms. And finally, the all-hands message. I had a draft ready. It wasn't grand. It said what mattered. At the head of the table, I plugged in a drive. The dashboard flickered to a company-wide banner. Steady hands, clear eyes. We honor our founders' safeguards and our people's work. Continuity over noise. Systems over slogans. If you keep the ship running, you are seen. If you build, repair, reconcile, or serve, you are the future. No signature line, no victory lap. The message was the signature. The chair nodded. We'll minute this, she said to the secretary. To me, you'll need an interim team. I'll pull from the bones, I said. People who know where the screws are. On my way out, I paused by the framed photo wall. Elias, young and stubborn. The first server rack with a fan aimed at it like a prayer. The night of Series B when we ordered pizzas and someone forgot plates and nobody cared. None of the pictures were staged. That's why they still worked. Downstairs, I asked security to hold the elevators for a minute. Then I wrote 3 emails. To payroll, your work holds families together. Nothing changes about your schedules or approvals today. If someone pressures you to sprint, route it to me. To compliance, thank you for keeping receipts. Meet at noon. Bring questions and the audit log. We'll close loops. To the whole company, we owe you clarity and time. You'll get both. Bring your lists. We'll solve boring problems first, because boring problems make tomorrow possible. Outside, the air felt lighter, not triumphant, just aligned. I walked to the cafe. The barista looked up like I'd stepped out of a rumor. Is it okay? She asked. It will be, I said. We're going to fix the unglamorous things. That's how companies survive. Back in my car, I opened the folder on my phone labeled Echoes. I listened to the first voicemail, consider yourself history. And then to the last, please. I deleted them both, not out of mercy, out of maintenance. You clear what doesn't serve the structure. People love a revenge story because it feels like heat. But the real lesson is colder, kinder. Build processes that outlast pride. Keep the receipts. Protect the quiet workers. You can fire a person at 7:58 a.m. and post a victory gif at 9, but noon still belongs to the paperwork and to the people who respect it.